Sorry about that, guys. Here we go. Where's my thing? And boom. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah. All right. Cool. Sorry about that. Um had some technical problems real quick. Now, fortunately, I was able to remember exactly what I was saying. Um I've got brothers, okay? And in the culture that I come from. Oh, wait. Yeah. In the culture that I come from, it's fascinating because um my culture, and we're talking like ghetto culture. Um yeah, we don't reveal a lot of positive stuff. There's this thought where if people, hey Daryl, thanks for coming back. Um, we in ghetto culture, at least in LA, if you show that you're smart, people will tear you down. If you show that you're doing something good for someone, then everyone will essentially um, demand that you do it for them. There's a lot of crabs and buckets and a lot of other things that go on like that. And yeah, the truth of the matter is, it's a bit of a pain. So, when I was growing up, I didn't know this. And this is an important piece because since I didn't know, um, since I didn't know that hiding the good things that you do was a thing, I never hid. Again, one of a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, you don't tell anything," and I'm like, "Yeah, once you get to know me, you'll realize that I talk too much, and there's very little subtext in anything I say. I've always been upfront and up forward." But my brothers and I used to get in knockdown, drag out verbal fights, especially when I was in my 20s, because I didn't feel like I got a lot of support from my older brothers. And yes, I'm saying plural, I'm the youngest of four. There was one in particular that I didn't think I got any support from. And there was a time where he was like, um, and this is something that happened with another friend of mine, where they would be mad at me for not appreciating the stuff they did for me. Although they would do not terrible things, but people would do terrible things to me in public, and they would support the people that were doing terrible things to me to save their reputations, but they were doing good things for me behind the scenes and not telling me that they were doing it. So when I got mad at how they did stuff in public, they would be like, "Well, you don't know what I do for you." And I'm like, "No, no, I don't." You do stuff for me? How are you getting upset that I can't see the good stuff that you're doing when you are hiding the stuff that you do? you know, I mean, it's really really interesting, and that's the ghetto side of this. But the the expectation is that since you're my family, of course I do good stuff for you. Okay. And I'm like going, okay, well, hang on a minute. That's what's expected in ghetto culture, specifically black ghetto culture. It's like, I love you, but I'm going to toughen you up, if you will. And I was very sensitive. Okay. Still am, just loud, angry, and since I'm tall, well armed, I don't cry as much as I used to. Um, But I go into the suburbs, and this is where this game was. And there is a huge expectation that I know their idioms and their gaming stuff, their cultural traditions, their gaming cultural traditions, a lot of stuff. And I'm constantly asking questions. Now, what I learned and what I'm still wrapping my head around is in the suburbs, asking questions is looked at as a challenge to authority because you ought to know. And since you ought to know, you do know. And since you do know, you're asking questions to make a person look bad. I went from a culture of open aggression and subtle support to a culture of false support, subtle aggression, and so many secrets. I literally was a northerner going into King's Landing. And fortunately, I had decent enough friends to guide me through that whole thing. They also let me play a not vampire, so it was an interesting thing. I was a mage in a vampire game. I held NPC status, but at the end I survived, so that was, I count that as a win in my book. But the communication that I had to learn in order to navigate the place that I was huge. I have one friend who, how can I put it? He is passive and benignly racist because he's from the upper middle class from the 1950s and 60s. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean he's a bad person. All right? He's not a bad person. It's just he knows that he means no harm. Therefore, unless the harm is really, 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 really apparent, don't talk to him about other stuff. I don't spend a lot of time with him, but it's one of those things. I once talked to him because the game was rigged. The game that I was playing in was very, very rigged. There was a person in the game that essentially cheated always to get her way, and the GMs had to let it happen. If not, she had the power to torpedo the entire game. Okay, she could either make the game miserable for everybody so they would quit, or she would stop allowing the game to happen at her house. Let's just call her... I had it in my head. If the chat can let me know... Yeah, how's the chat doing over there? Alright, some of you guys came back. That's awesome. Yeah, if some of you guys could let me know the name of the girl, the oldest girl from Rugrats, that would be cool. Well, let's just call her that name. Yeah, I think it was Angelica. Let's call her Angelica. And I talked to my friend, the benign racist. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, there's all this metagaming going around. Like, I don't know what the rules really are, because when I follow the rules as the book says, Angelica comes around and shuts everything down, And he's like, yeah, the game is rigged, and it's the only game in town. So if you want to play the game, this is the only one to play. Okay? And I'm like, oh, well, thank you. Because now that I know that is the game that I'm in, I can navigate that. And from that conversation on, for the next 2 years in that game, I had a good time. Because I know what to avoid. I knew what to expect. Because someone had communicated the real rules. I like to use blackjack as what is the term I'm looking for? Oh, yeah, as an example. A lot of people believe that playing blackjack, the focus of the game, the point of the game, is to get 21 in your cards, okay? You guys can look up blackjack. Yeah, it's to get 21 and not go over 21. And that's like reading the game out of the book. But the real game, the game that you're really playing when you're at the casino, is not necessarily get 21, just get more than the dealer and don't go over 21. And the dealer has to stop at 17. So that means you might have been aiming for 21. That is one goal, one way to win. Okay? But then, if you think I have to get 18 through 21, or hope the dealer gets over, that's 18, 19, 20, 21, and make the dealer bust. And or make the dealer bust. That's 5 options to win, and that's a completely different game. Okay? For the record, I once bought a car off of what I won off of blackjack. So that's, I'm not just pulling this out of my keister. But that right there is one of the really big things that communication is important on, especially when it comes to cultural expectations. Most people, and yeah, I'm looking at you and you and you too, forget that what is normal for them and what is easy for them may not be easy to a stranger, to someone from a different place. I constantly have to remind my friends, dude, I'm not from the suburbs. Okay? I'm not white. I come from a place where you don't call the cops. And I live in a place where I don't want people to call the cops, because once the cops are called, I end up in the back of the police vehicle, regardless of what I was doing at the time. Okay? So I'm not a big fan of badges just because of the culture that we live in the United States right now. Okay? But most people are like, yeah, but, cops are here to help you. I'm like, okay, cops are here to help you. And most of the time they're here to help you get away from me. Okay? And that's part of American culture. But that's a different show that I filmed down at the docks. It's a completely different thing. But when you're interacting with people, okay, a lot of the stuff I'm about to say is Bush League. It's simple. It's stupidly simple. All right? And that is, when you are interacting with people, you have to communicate clearly with them so that the two of you guys, regardless of what it is that you're trying to accomplish, can accomplish anything that you're trying to do efficiently. Now, of course, that's Bush League. But I'm going to talk about how. Okay? I got into a debate with someone. And this is something that I see all the time. I see it all the time. If I had clips, I would pull them up. I would show you. But one of the ways that people communicate nowadays is they talk about these big concepts. Okay? And the directions that they give you are interesting, because it's simple thing, big statement, simple thing. I was in a conversation with someone, and they said, look, you can't let what people think of you determine the course of your life. You can't let that happen. You just have to get over it. You have to get through it. You have to recognize the past, and you have to go toward the future. And I'm like, okay, how? How do you do that? Okay, well, you just get over it. And I'm like, I'm going to teach you how to make a magical sigil, okay? You take a concept, think of an idea, and then you write the idea down. Step 2, very simple thing. Remove all of the vowels from what you wrote down. Step 3, remove all the repeated consonants. Step 4, stretch them around and make a piece of art out of all the layers that's left. Okay? Step 5, fill it with magical energy. Step 6, you're done. Now, everyone can draw. Most people can write. Most people can go with images, especially, if you write it on clay and you take the clay and you stretch it out or whatever. Okay? But filling it with magical energy, that's a class in and of itself. All right? That is a completely different thing. All right? So when a person's like, yeah, well, you might lose your job because of this, and that, all you got to do is take your savings and reinvent yourself. And what are the steps to reinventing yourself to someone who's never had that option? Okay? This is what I like to call situational privilege. If you can say these big concepts, just this big idea, and expect that someone knows exactly what you're talking about, then you are operating from a place of your own cultural understanding, which is fine when you're communicating with someone from your culture. From your culture. Okay? Now, this applies in games in a really interesting way because every single game that people have played for a long time has house rules. Okay? Yeah, culture, house rules. They're very similar. What is a house rule? Let me make this clear. It is a rule that is not written down in the directions of the game that you play at your house. All right? The most common house rule that I can state, at least as far as American culture goes, is make one lap around the Monopoly board before you buy something. Okay? Matter of fact, Monopoly is almost infamous for their house rules. All right? Yeah, make one lap around the board, or all of the money that you get fined goes under the parking corner, and when you land on free parking, you collect that and you get that stipend. There's a lot of stuff, but the instructions state very clearly you don't give anybody stuff. When you land on something, you gotta buy it, or it goes to auction so everybody else can buy it. Like, it is boom, 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 boom. Those are the rules. But the house rules are the way that people play in their houses. Now, here's the big thing. House rules only apply to each individual house. But as I said at the beginning of what is now the last video, the way that people learn to do something tends to be the way that they believe it's done everywhere. Okay? Monopoly is a great example on this because so many people have so many different house rules that I have seen videos on. These are the actual rules. This is how you're supposed to play the game. We're gonna go through the rule book line by line. and that's what it was. And it turns out, you can just look on YouTube for "you're playing Monopoly wrong." Okay. But yeah, it's sorry, we got the chat in here going, yeah, kind of like the instructions on the Great British Baking Show. Yeah, that's exactly it. Make a fondant, go. Yeah, that's exactly like, well, if you're a baker, you're supposed to know how to make a fondant, so make a fondant. Make everything up to my expectations because you're supposed to have this title, right? All right, moving on. But yeah. So when that kind of thing comes down, it's like, dude, really? Like, most of the time in our culture, we learn things that pertain to the culture that we live in. This is one of the reasons that I never want to buy a home in the suburbs, because most places like the suburbs, they were literally put together to be separate from the rest of the operating world. Okay, that's just what they were. Check out White Flight, check out, middle class privilege, and you guys will see the suburbs were put together so that you didn't have to be around everyone else. And when that culture is the number one cultural paradigm that you're in, then you interact with things outside of the suburbs very awkwardly. Personally, I like living in various different places because I've lived from ghetto and trailer park to suburbs. Haven't gone mansion yet. Don't think I wanna. Seems like a lot to clean up. But yeah. So when it comes to communications and cultural expectations, it's easier to wrap your head around the concept as though you're dealing with the house rules of another game. And there are two things on this. One, when you're learning other people's house rules, it can be very difficult sometimes because they expect you to know and they get frustrated that you don't. Okay? And when you're in that space, it's on you to navigate it. I have a couple of different suggestions, or a couple of different ways that I've navigated, which is number one, make it very clear that you're asking in earnest. You have to assuage their fears in order to get the answer. Number two, find someone within that culture that won't be frustrated and annoyed with you having not growing up or grown up where they did. You know, that one tends to be a little more challenging, but far more rewarding and a lot easier. And of course, the third is leave. Again, that game is twisted, but it might be the only game in town. It might not be the only game in town. But these are the things that we go into. Now, I learned this a bunch of different times in life. I have an old friend that I used to run a mage game for, and he was telling me about how the daytime commercials for bartending schools, if you guys are unemployed or ditching school, you know which ones I'm talking about. Come to our school for profit. You can learn bartending, hotel management, restaurant management, all those other things. He worked at quite a few bars, and he's like, bars are interesting because you can waste your money at one of those schools, but if you get hired at a bar, you're going to have to learn how to make the drinks on the menu the way the bar makes them, not the way that you learned in school. And I said, interesting. So I'm glad I'm not planning on going to bartending school, because I would die of cirrhosis of the liver. That too is another story. But the expectations of communication. I know currently, at this point in time, I know I annoy a lot of people when I'm in conversation with them, because I'm constantly going, hang on, what do you mean by this? Or, hang on, are you talking about this? Because that's not what I'm talking about. And I do that in good faith to make sure that we are talking about the same things, because most arguments between people are based on massive misunderstandings. The rest of them are based on differences in beliefs, and you just can't argue beliefs, because, what are you going to do? You can't change a person's belief. Only life can do that. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. But when you are in a new culture, a new place, this is a new gaming table, a new gaming store, a new job, a new school. It is good, and this is, in my opinion, one of the reasons that anthropology is essentially one of your GEs when you first get to college, your general education, the requirements for pretty much anything, is because each culture has its own rules. And learning how to learn a culture's rules is very important, because once you get into that culture, the better you are at recognizing how things are different, the better you can adjust. Okay? And I know it's weird, because at this point in time, with internet and politics and all that stuff, there's so much bad faith communication. Okay? There's a Jewish gentleman out there, and no, I'm not anti-Semitic, but he is. And mostly everything he says is in bad faith. Okay? And he communicates just like a lot of people that feel like they have more power than you do will ask questions not in good faith, but in order to end the conversation, make you look stupid, or yell at you and prove that they're right. Okay, this is the world that we live in the United States right now. Okay, and how do we navigate that? Well, that's a tough one. But when you move in good faith and you deal with someone who isn't, you have the choice to continue to interact with them. Okay, now it might be don't interact with them and lose your job. Okay, I said there's a choice. I didn't always say that they're good ones. And again, this makes me think of, a lot of people that didn't want to talk with me about a lot of things because they're like, well, you had a choice to do this. And I'm like, yeah, but what else did I have to choose from? Well, you could have chosen to die. And I'm now at the time, and again, I'm Mr. Full Disclosure, I have had suicidal tendencies my entire life, and I don't mean the band. Okay? So when people talk to me about, well, you could have chose to die, I'm like, weren't you on suicide watch the last time I tried to do something like that? So it's like, these are people that don't communicate in good faith, and they have their reasons, and their reasons are not always malign. All right, sometimes they're just overwhelmed. There's something, there is a lot of weight on people right now, and some people are just plain jerks. That's just what's out there. Okay, but I come at everything from a place of good faith. When I ask, I want to know. And when I share my experiences, I'm sharing my experiences because I really think that adding context to a lot of things helps in understanding. Okay? With most of my friends, I make it clear I'm not from your culture. And if you are not going to understand the culture that I come from, you at least need to understand that I'm not from your culture. And what that means is there are a lot of things that you might take for granted, as in take as common sense, as things that everybody knows. Get that. But if you're going to deal with me personally, you have to leave a space in your mind for the possibility that I don't. Just like when I interact with you. When I take my white friends to the hood, it is interesting because they end up as fish out of water. And when they are the fish out of water that are out there, it becomes interesting because, man, they freak out. And I'm like, no, you're not in control here. You're not this whole thing. Just let me guide you and trust that I'm taking you to a good place. Okay? But with the way that the world is right now, there are so many people that are hurt. So many people that are afraid that they're being screwed over. And for good reason. A lot of people are being screwed over. But that doesn't mean, now it really doesn't mean that at the end of the day, everyone is trying to beat you. And there's a lot of communication right now that's based on this idea that someone is trying to hurt you, take advantage of you. I call it cultural PTSD, which is something I've suffered from my entire life, and most people from the trailer parks, the farm, and the ghetto have suffered from it their entire lives. Not to mention most women, most people who are not born to positions of obvious power have some sense of cultural post-traumatic stress disorder. And so that triggering, that whole, oh my God, are they trying to hurt me? Oh my God, are they trying to take advantage of me? Matter of fact, the more that I deal with people in the higher tiers of economic stuff, they have their own cultural scars. Oh my God, is this person trying to take my money? Oh my God, is this person trying to con me? And honestly, I think that when interacting with people, knowing these things, understanding these things, and walking into it with not a plan, but with an awareness that a plan might be needed, will help us communicate more, have better games, and interact with each other a little better. But with that, hey, look at that. My music is coming back now. I want to thank you guys for showing up to both of these streams. I'm going to re-edit them so that I can put them up as one video like I normally do. And let me know what's up. Let me know what you guys think about this down there in the comments and all that stuff. And if you're not down for dealing with the comments, I get that. I know what it's like to not want to deal with stuff in public. So pull up your keyboard and send me personally an email over at backinthedeck@gmail.com. That's BACKINTHEDECK at gmail.com. Also, follow us on YouTube. You know, you guys are here, you're watching the show. Thank you guys for showing up, especially you, Shannon Lay, one of our big patrons out there. And hit us up on the social medias. You know, we got our Twitters over at twitter.com/backinthedeck. You can hit us up on Facebook by joining the group Deckers on the Book. I check all of these things like 40 times a day. And as I said, head on over to SoundCloud and all those other places. And if you guys want to help us out, like Shannon Lay and Paul Mansfield and quite a few others, you guys can head over to patreon.com/BID_P and join our Patreon. If we have your interest, that would be awesome. And of course, bring friends to our stuff, and you guys get to watch our videos and get keychains and stuff. One of the things I've been doing for the past week or so. Oh yeah, and you know, of course, hit us up over on our SoundCloud and download the audio from this stuff. Now, one of the things that I've been doing for the past few is working on our merchandise, our Patreon perks, our tiles, our you know, our gaming accessories, just so many different things, along with holding a day job and working on a very special show for our patrons. So we've got a lot of stuff that go on when it comes to doing all that stuff. But looks like my hour is up, and no, Shannon, don't be sad. Yeah, don't be sad. You know, yeah, because hey, we're here, and yeah, we are checking out. But with that, I'm gonna say thank you guys for showing up. And of course, if anybody tells you that you can't like what you like because of the circumstances of your birth, be it race, religion, creed, gender identity, sexual orientation, your disability, or your budget, you just tell them that we said to take those cards and put them back in the deck. This is Solar Gray, the Cinematic Sorcerer, and we will see you next time on the Dark Side of the Room.